Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about yourself, about your life, and about the people closest to you was turned upside down? Where a simple, unexpected encounter shattered the walls you'd built around your heart, leaving you vulnerable, confused, and yet more alive than ever before? Today, I'm sharing a deeply personal and emotionally charged story that will take you on a journey of discovery, longing, and the undeniable power of human connection. This is a story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, family, and desire. Are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. I was in the middle of changing my clothes when out of nowhere, my stepson walked into my room. What happened next was something I never could have imagined. Something so unexpected and thrilling that I just had to share this story with you. For years, I had called the house home. Yet the echoes of my footsteps in the vast, empty rooms made it feel foreign, like I didn't belong there anymore. My wife, Elisa, was a successful artist, driven and dedicated, utterly consumed by her work. I admired her ambition, but it had slowly driven a wedge between us. The long hours at the office and constant late-night calls had left me feeling invisible, like an afterthought in her well-organized world. Our evenings together had become painfully predictable. She would sit on the couch scrolling through emails or making notes in her planner while I pretended to be engrossed in a book or a TV show I wasn't really watching. There were no more lingering glances, no warm touches, no late-night whispers. We existed in the same space, but lived in entirely separate worlds. When Noah, my stepson, moved back home after finishing university, it brought a flicker of life into the house. He had matured into a handsome and confident young man, his easy charm a refreshing contrast to Elise's distant demeanor. He was polite and thoughtful, always asking if I needed help with dinner or if I wanted company while I drank my evening tea. His presence filled some of the empty spaces in the house, though I told myself it was purely circumstantial. Loneliness can make anyone crave connection, even if it's fleeting, but the truth was harder to admit. There was something about Noah that unsettled me, a magnetic pull I couldn't quite explain. Sometimes I would catch his eyes lingering on me a moment too long, or he would brush past me in the kitchen, his touch light but deliberate. I dismissed these moments as harmless, attributing them to my overactive imagination. After all, he was just being kind. That afternoon, the sunlight streamed through the blinds in my bedroom, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My blouse was unbuttoned halfway, revealing the delicate lace of my bra underneath. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I used to feel beautiful once desire, but time, routine, and neglect had dulled that feeling, leaving me with a hollow I couldn't shake. I slipped off the blouse and reached for the silk robe hanging on the edge of the bed. The cool fabric felt luxurious against my skin, a small indulgence in an otherwise monotonous day. As I unclasped my bra, the sudden creak of the door opening startled me. My heart leapt into my throat as I turned, clutching the robe to my chest. There he was, Noah, standing in the doorway, his expression frozen in a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't place. His eyes widened slightly, flicking between my face and the robe I held tightly in front of me. He stammered, taking a step back. His voice was strained. I didn't mean to. I thought you were downstairs. It's okay, I managed to say, though my voice wavered. I didn't hear you come in. I just got back, he said quickly, his gaze darting to the floor as though trying to find somewhere safe to look. I didn't mean to interrupt. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt charged, thick with unspoken tension. I could feel my cheeks flush, the heat spreading down my neck. Despite the awkwardness, there was something in his eyes that made it impossible to look away. You didn't interrupt, I said finally, forcing a nervous laugh. I was just changing, right? He said, his voice tight. I'll leave you to it. He turned to leave, but my voice stopped him before I could think better of it. Wait, he froze, glancing over his shoulder. Yeah. I hesitated, unsure of what I was about to say. My mind raced, searching for a reason to keep him there, though I knew I shouldn't. "It's nice to have you around," I said finally, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The house feels less empty." He turned back slowly, leaning against the doorframe. His expression softened, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I like being here," he said simply. "It's nice." The way he said it, so earnest and direct, made my breath catch for a moment. I forgot about the robe clutched to my chest, the vulnerability of the moment. His gaze met mine, steady and unflinching, and I felt something stir deep within me, something I hadn't felt in years. "Maybe you should knock next time, though," I said, trying to inject some levity into the moment. He chuckled softly, the sound low and warm, noting as he stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my robe still clutched tightly around me. My heart was pounding, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and guilt. What had just happened? And why did it leave me feeling more alive than I had in years? The craziest part was that this was only the beginning. In that moment, I could feel the way we had looked at each other, the exciting tension in the room. We both felt that, but I could never have imagined what was still coming. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur, though my mind was far from calm. I moved through the motions of my daily routine, folding laundry, straightening up the living room, and prepping dinner. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Noah and the charged moment we had shared. I told myself I was overanalyzing. That was nothing more than a fleeting, awkward encounter. But the memory of his eyes, the way they lingered on me for just a heartbeat too long, refused to fade. By the time I heard the soft creak of footsteps coming down the stairs, the house was filled with the aroma of roasted vegetables and chicken. I stood by the kitchen counter, pretending to be engrossed in chopping parsley, though my heart leapt at the sound of his approach. "Smells great," Noah said as he entered the room. His voice was casual, but there was a hesitance in his step, as though he wasn't sure how to navigate the space between us now. "Thanks," I replied, glancing up at him briefly before returning my attention to the cutting board. "I hope you're hungry." "Always," he said with a small laugh, moving to grab plates from the cabinet. For a moment, the sound of clinking dishes filled the silence, grounding us in the ordinary. But I couldn't help but feel that the air still carried the weight of what had happened earlier. We both felt that something had changed, something had started. As we sat down to eat, the conversation was light, his plans for finding a job now that he'd graduated, the old friends he had reconnected with since moving back. I nodded along, asking questions here and there, but my focus kept slipping, drawn instead to the way his hands moved. The sound of his voice, the occasional flicker of his eyes toward mine. "You seem distracted," he said suddenly, snapping me out of my thoughts. I blinked, startled. "Oh no, I'm just tired, that's all." He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an expression that made my chest tighten. "You've seemed off lately. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. The truth was complicated, tangled up in feelings I didn't fully understand myself. "It's nothing," I said finally, forcing a smile. "Just the usual stuff. Elise is always busy, and the house feels, well, you know how it is." Noah nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to his plate. "Yeah, I get that. It's weird having her so absent all the time. It's like she's here, but she's not really here." His words struck a chord, and I felt a pang of sadness. I hadn't expected exactly. I murmured, "It's been that way for a long time." For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of shared understanding settling between us. When he finally looked up, there was something in his eyes, empathy perhaps, or something deeper, that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. "Hey," he said softly, his voice warm. "You don't have to deal with it all alone. You know I'm here." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard, and I felt my defenses waver. "Thanks, Noah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That means a lot." He smiled, and for a moment, the tension eased. We finished dinner in companionable silence, the unspoken connection between us lingering but unacknowledged. After he cleaned up, he retreated to the living room, and I busied myself with tidying the kitchen, trying to shake the feelings that had taken root. Later that evening, as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I paused by the door to his room. The faint glow of his desk lamp spilled into the hallway, and the urge to knock, to bridge the space between us, was almost overwhelming. But I forced myself to move on. I slipped into my room, closing the door softly behind me, and sank onto the bed with a deep sigh. I told myself it was just loneliness, just the natural yearning for connection that anyone would feel in my situation. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The way he looked at me, the way my pulse quickened in his presence. It wasn't something I could ignore. I didn't sleep well that night. My dreams filled with fragmented images and feelings that left me restless. When I finally woke, the sunlight streaming through the blinds felt intrusive, as though it were exposing something I wasn't ready to face. I dragged myself out of bed, determined to shake off the lingering haze, and headed to the bathroom for a shower. The hot water did little to clear my mind, and as I stood there, letting the steam envelop me, I found myself replaying the events of the previous day, the way he had lingered in the doorway, the quiet intensity in his gaze. It all felt like a slow-burning fire I couldn't extinguish. Wrapped in a towel, I stepped out of the bathroom and into my bedroom, only to freeze in place as the door creaked open. My heart leapt into my throat as Noah stepped inside. His eyes widened in surprise. "Oh God, I'm sorry," he said quickly, turning to leave. "Noah, wait," I blurted out before I could stop myself. He hesitated, his hand still on the doorknob, and turned back to face me. "Yeah." The words caught in my throat as I stood there, clutching the towel tightly around me. My mind raced, searching for something to say, but all I could focus on was the tension crackling between us like electricity. I began, but my voice faltered. His gaze met mine, steady and unflinching, and I felt the world tilt slightly off its axis. "It's okay," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to go." He lingered in the doorway, his hands still resting on the knob. The air between us felt impossibly heavy, charged with unspoken tension that neither of us seemed willing to break. His eyes flicked down for a split second, then back up to meet mine. I swallowed hard, tightening my grip on the towel wrapped around me, but I didn't move. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice soft but laced with something deeper, something that made my pulse quicken. I nodded, though the motion felt more instinctive than deliberate. "It's fine," I murmured, forcing a small smile. "You just startled me. That's all." He took a tentative step into the room, letting the door click shut behind him. "I really didn't mean to," he said, his gaze holding mine as though searching for reassurance. "I thought you'd be downstairs. I was just finishing up in the shower." I replied, my voice steadier now. "You don't have to feel so guilty." He let out a small, nervous laugh, scratching the back of his neck. "I think we're both a little on edge." That much was clear. Every breath, every movement, every fleeting glance felt weighted with meaning. I was hyper-aware of how close he was now, the warmth of his presence radiating through the space between us. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I couldn't bring myself to step back or look away. I didn't mean to interrupt. He said again, his voice quieter this time, "I just wanted to check in on you." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard, and for a moment, the walls I had carefully built around myself felt fragile. "Why?" I asked softly, though the question came out almost as a challenge. He hesitated, his expression shifting as though he were debating whether to speak the truth. "Because I care about you," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "You're always doing everything for everyone else. And I don't think anyone ever asks how you're really doing." The words hit me harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, but found myself at a loss. The vulnerability in his gaze was disarming, and I realized just how much I had craved someone's undivided attention. Someone who saw me for who I was rather than what I could provide. "I'm fine," I said eventually, though the words felt hollow. "I don't want you worrying about me." "Well, I do," he replied simply, taking another step closer. "You deserve to feel appreciated." The room felt impossibly small now, the space between us shrinking until it was almost non-existent. My grip on the towel tightened, but did little to steady the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I wanted to protest, to put some distance between us, but the truth was, I didn't want him to leave. Not now, not ever. Noah, I began, but his name barely left my lips before he spoke again. You don't have to pretend everything's okay all the time, he said, his voice gentle but insistent. It's okay to let someone take care of you for a change. A lump formed in my throat, and I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. I hadn't realized just how starved I was for connection until this moment. The weight of years of neglect, of putting on a brave face, suddenly felt unbearable. I blinked rapidly, willing the tears away, but one escaped, sliding down my cheek before I could wipe it away. Noah reached out, his thumb brushing against my skin. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that it left me momentarily breathless. His touch lingered, his fingers warm against my cheek, and I felt myself leaning into him without even realizing it. Theodore, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. The sound of my name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt my resolve weaken. His hand dropped to his side, but the space he had left felt like a void, pulling me closer. I don't know what we're doing, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't right. Maybe not, he admitted, his gaze unwavering, but it feels real. The honesty in his words was both terrifying and intoxicating. I searched his face, looking for a sign, a reason to pull away, but all I found was an openness that made it impossible to retreat. Slowly, tentatively, he reached for my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. I didn't stop him. The towel around me felt heavy now, a barrier I wasn't sure I wanted to maintain. I hesitated, my mind racing with all the reasons why this was a line we couldn't cross, but my body refused to listen. Instead, I found myself stepping closer, the gap between us disappearing entirely. Noah, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't respond with words. Instead, he leaned in, his breath warm against my skin. I felt his hesitation, the silent question hanging in the air. And for a brief moment, I thought I might step away, but then his lips brushed against mine, tentative and light, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The kiss was soft at first, barely more than a whisper of contact, but it ignited something inside me that I couldn't contain. My free hand found its way to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my palm. He pulled me closer, his hands gentle yet firm, and I felt the towel loosen around me. Reality blurred as the kiss deepened, each movement more deliberate than the last. The warmth of his body pressed against mine, the strength of his arms encircling me. It was overwhelming and yet exactly what I had been yearning for. Every thought, every doubt, every fear melted away as I surrendered to the moment, each second pulling me deeper into something I couldn't quite explain, something I didn't want to end. His lips were soft, but assertive, and the way he held me close yet careful made my pulse race. For a moment, it felt as though the walls around us disappeared, leaving nothing but the electric connection we shared. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes searched mine as if looking for reassurance that this wasn't just a dream. I could see the same questions swirling in his gaze that were racing through my mind. What were we doing? How'd we let things come to this, and why? Despite every rational thought screaming at me to stop, did it feel so impossible to let go? I began, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say that would make sense of this? That would undo the spark that had ignited between us? You don't have to say anything, Noah said softly, his voice steady despite the flush on his cheeks. We can stop if you want. I hesitated, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like the only sound in the room. My mind screamed at me to step back, to create space, to pull away from the edge before we fell any further. But my body betrayed me. I didn't move, I didn't speak. I just stood there, locked in his gaze, my chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. I don't know what I want, I admitted finally, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Everything feels complicated. It doesn't have to be, he said, taking a step closer. His voice was calm, but there was an urgency in his eyes, a quiet plea that sent shivers down my spine. You don't have to figure everything out right now. I wanted to believe him, wanted to lose myself in the simplicity of his words. But the weight of what we were doing, the boundaries we were crossing, pressed heavily on my chest. This isn't fair to you, I whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. Theodore, he said, his tone firm but gentle. I'm not a kid. I know what I'm doing. His words hung in the air, challenging me in a way that left me breathless. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't a child anymore. He was a grown man, confident and self-assured, and yet the vulnerability in his expression reminded me of the boy I had watched grow up. It was that mix of strength and tenderness that made it so hard to resist him. Without thinking, I reached up, my fingers brushing against his cheek. He leaned into the touch, his eyes fluttering closed for just a moment before meeting mine again. Tell me what you're thinking, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm scared, I admitted, the honesty of the words catching me off guard. Scared of what this means, scared of what happens if we don't stop. His hand found mine, his touch warm and steady. You don't have to be scared, he said, his gaze unwavering. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. His reassurance sent a wave of relief through me, though it didn't quiet the storm of emotion swirling inside. It's not just about me, I said, my voice trembling. There's so many people who could get hurt. I know, he said, his thumb brushing gently against my hand. But right now, it's just us. Nothing else matters. His words were intoxicating, and for a moment, I let myself believe them, let myself sink into the warmth of his presence, the safety of his touch. Slowly, he leaned in again, his lips brushing against mine with a tenderness that made my heart ache. I responded instinctively, my body leaning into his as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. The towel slipped from my grasp, pulling at my feet, but I didn't care. All that mattered was the way his hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, the way his lips pressed against mine with increasing urgency. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered breath felt like a spark igniting a fire deep within me. I didn't know how long we stood there, lost in each other, before he guided me toward the bed. The world outside felt like a distant memory, the weight of reality replaced by the intensity of the moment as we sank onto the mattress. His hands traced the curve of my back, his touch setting my skin ablaze. This feels, I began, my voice faltering as his lips trailed along my collarbone. This feels so right, he finished, his voice husky and low. It felt right. I didn't have the strength to argue, nor did I want to. All I wanted was to stay in this moment, to lose myself in the passion that had been buried for far too long. His hands explored my body with a mix of confidence and care, each touch sending waves of pleasure coursing through me as I tangled my fingers in his hair, pulling him closer. I realized how starved I had been for intimacy, for connection. This wasn't just about desire. It was about feeling alive again, about being seen and wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. And in that moment, I didn't care about the consequences. All I cared about was him, and that was the reason I didn't pull back from anything. His breath was soft against my neck as he kissed his way along my skin, his hands exploring with a tenderness that made my heart ache. I tried to focus on the moment, to lose myself in the way his touch sent shivers down my spine. But the weight of everything still lingered at the edge of my thoughts. The boundaries we were crossing felt both impossibly far away and heartbreakingly close. Every instinct told me to pull back, to put a stop to this before we went too far, but his hands, his lips, his quiet murmur of reassurance made it impossible. This doesn't feel real, I whispered, my voice trembling as his lips moved to my shoulder. It's real, he replied, his voice steady and sure. His certainty should have calmed me, but instead, it only deepened the conflict within me. Noah, I murmured, my hands resting against his chest as I tried to steady my breathing. We're going to regret this. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, his expression earnest and unwavering. Do you regret it now? He asked softly. I hesitated, the weight of his question pressing down on me. No, I admitted, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. "Then don't think about what we should or shouldn't do," he said softly, his hand cupping my cheek as his thumb brushed lightly against my skin. "Just think about how we feel right now." His words were disarming, and I felt my defenses crumble under the intensity of his gaze. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Instead, I let myself lean into him, let myself be carried by the moment, by the way he held me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. As his lips met mine again, I felt the last remnants of doubt fade away. The kiss was deeper this time, more urgent, more deliberate. His hands moved to the small of my back, pulling me closer, and I could feel the strength in his arms as he guided me gently onto the bed. The world outside felt like a distant memory, the weight of reality replaced by the intensity of his touch. "You're beautiful," he murmured against my lips, the sincerity in his voice making my heart ache. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I hadn't felt beautiful in years. But the way he looked at me made it impossible to argue. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in so long. Desire, yes, but also admiration, respect, even love. It was overwhelming, and I felt tears sting my eyes, though I wasn't sure why. "Noah," I whispered, my voice breaking as I tangled my fingers in his hair. "This is perfect," he finished for me, his lips trailing down to my collarbone. "You're perfect." The words made my chest tighten, and I felt my hands tremble as they rested against his shoulders. I wanted to believe him, to let myself sink into the safety of his embrace, but the reality of what we were doing still lingered at the edges of my thoughts. "We shouldn't," I began, but he silenced me with a kiss, his hands cradling my face as if to reassure me. "Don't think about what we should or shouldn't do," he said softly, his forehead resting against mine. "Just think about how we feel right now." His words were intoxicating, and I felt my resolve weakened further. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word pulled me deeper into a place I wasn't sure I could escape from, and yet, I didn't want to escape. Not now, not when he made me feel so alive, so seen, so wanted. As we moved together, our bodies entwined, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. It was as though every weight, every worry, every expectation had been stripped away, leaving only the raw, unfiltered connection between us. His hands explored every curve, every inch of me, and I felt myself respond with a hunger that surprised even me. "You're incredible," he murmured, his voice husky as he pulled me closer. "I've wanted this, wanted you for so long." His confession sent a jolt through me, and I felt my breath catch as I met his gaze. "Noah," I began, but the words were lost as he captured my lips in another searing kiss. The rest of the world melted away as we lost ourselves in each other. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered breath felt like a spark igniting something deep within me. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and utterly consuming. Of course, I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you that we went further and further. But just as the moment reached its peak, a sound broke through the haze, a sharp, unmistakable knock at the door. My heart stopped, and I felt Noah tense beside me. "Theodore," Elise's voice called from the other side of the door, her tone casual but curious. "Are you in there?" Panic surged through me, and I scrambled to sit up, pulling the sheet tightly around me as Noah froze, his eyes wide with alarm. "Oh my God," I whispered, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure Elisa would hear it. "A moment ago, the noises I had made," Noah said quickly, his voice low as he grabbed his shirt from the floor. "Just stay calm, stay calm," I hissed, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's right outside," Elisa called again from the hallway. The sound of the doorknob rattling, sending a fresh wave of panic through me. "Just a second," I called out, my voice strained as I tried to sound casual. Noah grabbed his jeans, pulling them on hastily as I frantically tried to compose myself. The room felt stifling now, the air thick with the weight of what had just happened. As Elisa's footsteps moved away from the door, I let out a shaky breath, but the tension between Noah and me remained. "This is bad," I murmured, my hands trembling as I clutched the sheet tightly around me. "We'll be fine," Noah said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We just have to be careful." The door rattled again, louder this time, as Elisa's voice called out from the hallway. "Theodore, are you sure everything's okay?" My heart raced, my breath coming in shallow bursts as the reality of the situation closed in around me. No. I grabbed his shirt from the floor and slipped it on. My movements quick but careful. His calmness should have reassured me, but it only amplified the panic clawing at my chest. "I'll be right out," I called, my voice strained as I tried to sound normal. My hands fumbled with the sheet, pulling it tightly around me as I glanced at Noah. "You need to go," I whispered, and he nodded, understanding the urgency in my tone. Without a word, he moved toward the window, his movements fluid and quiet. The idea of him sneaking out like this, like a guilty secret, sent a pang of regret through me, but there was no time to dwell on it. "Be careful," I whispered as he slid the window open, his gaze meeting mine for a fleeting moment. "I will," he murmured, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We'll talk later," and then he was gone, disappearing into the night as the window slid shut behind him. I stood frozen for a moment, the room eerily quiet save for the pounding of my heart. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to steady my trembling hands and walk toward the door. When I opened it, Elisa stood on the other side, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes scanning my face. "You've been in there a while." "I was just lying down," I lied, my voice faltering slightly. I wasn't feeling great. Her expression softened, her concern evident as she stepped closer. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "No, I'm fine," I said quickly, stepping back to create some distance. "Just a headache. I think I need some water." She nodded, though her gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than I was comfortable with. "I'll get it for you," she said, turning toward the stairs. As soon as she disappeared down the hallway, I let out a shaky breath, leaning against the doorframe for support. The room felt too quiet now, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me like a tidal wave. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more chaotic than the last. What had I done, and how had I let it go this far? By the time Elisa returned with a glass of water, I had managed to pull myself together, though my heart still felt like it was lodged in my throat. I took the glass from her with a small smile and murmured a thank you as she studied me with quiet concern. "You've been stressed," she said, her voice gentle. "Even noticed." The irony of her observation wasn't lost on me, and I forced another smile as I sipped the water. "It's nothing," I said, setting the glass on the nightstand. "I just need some rest." She nodded, leaning down to press a kiss to my forehead. The gesture was familiar, comforting, and yet it felt distant, like a shadow of what it used to be. "I'll let you sleep," she said, her hand lingering on my shoulder for a moment before she turned and left the room. The door clicked shut behind her, and I sank onto the bed, my head in my hands. The weight of my actions felt unbearable now, the thrill of the moment replaced by a gnawing guilt that threatened to consume me. I thought of Noah, of the way he had looked at me. The way his touch had made me feel alive again. But what now? What happened next? The days that followed were a blur of half-finished conversations and stolen glances. Noah and I avoided being alone together, the tension between us palpable but unspoken. Elisa remained blissfully unaware, her attention focused on work as always. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. Late one night, as the house lay silent, I found myself standing outside Noah's door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The pull to see him, to talk to him, was overwhelming, but I hesitated, my thoughts tangled in a web of fear and longing. Before I could decide, the door opened, and there he was, his expression a mix of surprise and something softer. "Theodore," he said quietly, his voice low and filled with a warmth that made my chest ache. "I needed to talk," I said, my voice trembling. "About everything." He nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of his desk lamp casting shadows across the walls. I stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, unsure of where to begin. I can't stop thinking about what happened, I admitted finally, my hands twisting nervously in front of me. And I don't know what to do. Neither can I, he said, his gaze steady as he moved closer, but I don't regret it. His words sent a shiver through me, and I felt tears sting my eyes. Noah, this is so complicated. Elisa, she's your mother. I know, he said softly, his hand reaching out to brush against mine. And I hate that this hurts you, but I can't pretend I don't feel this way. The honesty in his voice broke something inside me, and I felt my resolve falter. This can't happen again, I said, though the words fell hollow. We can't keep doing this. I know, he said again, his expression pained, but that doesn't change how I feel. The silence between us was heavy, filled with the weight of everything we couldn't say, and yet as he stepped closer, his hand brushing against my cheek, I felt the pull again, the same magnetic force that had drawn us together before. I just want you to be happy, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, even if it's not with me. The words were like a knife to my chest, and I felt tears spill over as I looked at him. Noah, but before I could say anything more, he kissed me again. The gesture soft and filled with all the unspoken emotions that had been building between us. For a moment, I let myself sink into it, let myself feel the raw, unfiltered connection that had brought us to this point. When we finally pulled apart, I knew things would never be the same. The lines we had crossed couldn't be undone, and the path ahead felt impossibly uncertain. But in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Now, after all, I sometimes feel some regret. Do you think I should tell Elisa about it? Let me know in the comments. It would really help me out. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Your feedback helps me create more heartfelt, emotional, and relatable content. Stay tuned for more stories that explore the depths of human connection and the complexities of love. Thank you for watching.